All right, can everyone hear me okay in the back? All right, I want to do a little exercise for the interest of disease management and wellness. Can everybody just stand up real quick for me? I need you to put your hands out like that. I need you to do this. Thank you. I always like to start things out with a standing ovation, and I appreciate it. I am actually very honored to be down here. My colleague came up to me in the office. He came down. He goes, EMS Redline. He gave me a briefing about everything that you guys do, and said they're looking for a speaker. And I'm like, well, I do that quite a bit. I'll do some breakout session. I'll do something, right? Usually about 20, 30, 40 people, that sort of thing. So I submit the topic, the Baldrige categories, because I have a little bit of a passion around this particular subject matter. Specifically with EMS, because prior to being with the Addis group, I had my own firm for nearly 10 years. And a significant portion of what I did as an organization was I serviced EMS service providers as well as nursing homes. And I'll share a little story about my aha moment when it came to the Baldrige categories. So Jeff comes down after I submitted my information. He says, great, they got you on the docket to speak. I said, okay, great. And they said, well, you're keynoting. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, so I really had to put some polish to this thing. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I want to give you a little bit of a background on Malcolm Baldrige. So before I start, though, who here has actually an understanding of the Baldrige categories? You have some experience with it, that sort of thing. Just a couple of hands. Okay. So I just usually like to gauge the group to find out level of understanding. I want to give you some background on who Malcolm Baldrige is, who he was. A little bit about the Deming effect, and I want to lay out the premise, the challenge, the principles, how it's applied to EMS, okay? And then I'm going to revisit the challenge, okay? I like to walk around, by the way, so I don't have the remote gizmo. So I'm over here, I'm over here, so I'm going to keep coming over here. Now, welcome to Orlando, right? I intentionally put these slides up there because it's in the same line of thinking I'm hoping you leave here with, all right? And that's the fact that I want you to think differently about what you do. All right? If there's one goal that I have in the next 4.5 hours is getting you to think. Okay, 4.5 hours isn't much time. Okay. We are literally in the aorta of the customer experience, are we not? My family, we're Disney junkies. We've been coming down here since my daughter was 5. She's 13, and we're already planning our June trip to come back down. So. We love the experience, and that is exactly what it is that we're trying to deliver in what we do, is the experience. You know, we're trying to save lives, serve our community, serve our stakeholders, and it's all about the experience. So if there's one thing I want you to leave here today when I'm done, is to think a little differently about what you do and how you do it. All right? I call these duct tape moments, and I want to set this up before I go further into the material. I am attempting to, in about 40 or so minutes, give you a Cliff Notes version of what is contained in a 105-page document, okay? So your brain might feel that way as I throw a bunch of things at you and ideas, and I understand that. I'll stick around after I'm done. If you want to have some questions or Q&A time, I'll stick around as long as I need to do that. But I'm about to throw a lot of information at you, and I have to take a treetop level, folks, because if you actually look at the EMS criteria for applying Baldrige to what you do, there are pages and pages and pages of questions and analysis and a framework that you need to adopt or at least explore. I can't possibly give that to you in the 3 hours because Mike's giving me 4 hours. All right, Malcolm Baldrige. Let me give you a little bit of background here. He served as Secretary of Commerce under President Reagan. And in his tenure, he basically cut the budget by 30% and actually staff administration by 25%. This guy basically exuded quality improvement and quality management. I wish the guy was still alive today because I think we're in desperate need of this type of management within governmental entities, and that's about as far as my political statements will go today. But he demonstrated an award-winning managerial style, and he actually delivered results. And that was the key. He actually delivered the results. And he reduced the budget. He actually created a lot of efficiencies and a lot of prosperities. What ended up happening was he actually was met with an untimely death in a rodeo accident of all things. And he had died. And in honor of Baldrige, they created what's called the Baldrige Act. They created literally a congressional act because they realized that for the United States to be a very competitive country, we need to have competitive and efficient and quality organizations within our nation's economy. So they honored him, and they came out with the Baldrige Act and the Baldrige categories. And through the act, they actually expanded the scope. It got into healthcare, it got into governmental entities, nonprofits, and essentially they established criteria for role model companies and organizations. What are the key criteria? How can we partner with organizations that want to be in the Baldrige categories, with those who have been there and who have demonstrated it very effectively, and to disseminate and share best practices, which is something I believe that you guys are actually living out right now. You're actually coming together as what we call a community of practice to share ideas on how we can do things better and help each other, right? What we call cooperation, right? Collaboration, right? This then led to what's called the Baldrige Award. And the Baldrige Award was really to focus on the nation's productivity. Strategic planning is absolutely essential. That's something I will definitely touch on as far as leadership. There's an element of statistical process control. So as Dr. Deming would say, in God we trust, all others have to bring data, okay? So the thing is there's a data, there's measurement, there's metrics, there's a system of trying to analyze what it is that we have and creating a dashboard, and that's something I'll touch on a little bit later as well. And it must be led by management. There needs to be a key leadership, and it needs to be customer-centered, okay? Which leads to Deming. Anybody familiar with Deming? Okay, just a little bit more background here. Dr. Deming, in fact, had a PhD in physics from Yale. Physics and mathematics. It's funny because there's another prominent management guru out there for process control. I'm drawing a blank right now. Dr. Goldratt, and he was an Israeli-trained physicist. So who would have thought that, you know, I thought physics. I was a physics major, chemistry major type of guy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. What could I possibly do? I don't want to get into science. And here, these guys made some very comfortable livings in physics and mathematics. He was the father of quality management. So what we have is we have Baldrige, we have Deming, and we start to see the quality movement, trying to go into organizations and really drive a focus on quality and delivery of results. And he pioneered what's called the 14 principles and the 7 deadly sins, right? And to really sum it up, there's a couple of observations that Dr. Deming had made. Number one is when you actually focus primarily on quality, right? Quality will go up, costs will decrease over time. But you need to look at the reversal of this concept. And this is something in my travels and working with a lot of organizations, there's this fixation that they're primarily focusing on cost control. And what ends up happening is when you focus on cost control, costs actually increase for some strange reason. There's a dilemma there. And the quality definitely tanks, okay? So in other words, cheap is what cheap gets, right? So you have to be very careful about what we try to do, right? So the premise. The premise here is applied to EMS operations is there's several bullet points here. Number one, EMS industry can be made better. There's this concept called the learning organization. And the learning organization has a very fundamental premise, and that is perfection is unattainable. So we need to get that through our heads right now, right? There's no beginning and no end. What we do as an organization, an operation, a service provider is we have to think cyclically. We are constantly trying to evaluate the quality of delivery, how we work with our patients, their families, our stakeholders, our community, our hospitals, our third parties, our suppliers, okay? Perfection is unattainable. It doesn't mean you cannot be perfecting, it just means you'll never arrive. And that's a healthy mindset. Thinking that we've arrived, you've already been lapsed. If you thought you already arrived, you're going to get complacent. So the whole idea here behind the Baldrige categories for EMS industry is that it can be and should be made better. EMS quality improvement should be continuous, which gets to my point. It's cyclical. It has to be continuous. Very simple model, the plan, do, study, act cycle. It's called the Shoehart cycle, right? So it goes constantly around and around and around. We start here, we analyze, we improve, we prototype, we adopt, we implement. It's going well, it's not going well, and we start the cycle all over again, right? The EMS processes yield data and information to the extent that quality can be improved. There's a lot of information out there that we can and should be capturing. Now, my travels from service provider to service provider, people are looking at different types of dashboards. And that's fine. You need to create a dashboard that's right for you. What is it that we need to operate better? What is it that we want to look at? So you get into a car, there's some standard things that we look at no matter what car you get into. We have a speedometer and usually a tach, right? But depending on the make and model, we might have different types of gadgets and gizmos and buttons, and that's fine, right? As an organization, you need to sit down and spend some purposeful time looking at the information that we capture. And what are we not capturing? What are we not looking at? So the idea here is that there's a lot of data and information out there. We need to go find it. What do we get now? What does it mean to us? How do we actually use it for outcomes? And what are we not getting? What are we not capturing here? Okay, and that's that getting out of the box mentality. And I struggle with that terminology sometimes, even when I'm working with my MBA students and that sort of thing, where I challenge them to get them these out of the box thinking type of things. I said, well, you know, if you're thinking out of the box, to me, you're physically still in it, right? I want you to get out completely. I want you to remove all boundaries. So when you're thinking through data acquisition and capture, what are we looking at? Always ask the question, well, what are we not looking at? You know, and then bring in different types of stakeholders to try to noodle that. And I think you have a great environment right here at these events to sit down and perhaps have like some sort of focus group that talks about, you know, data measures for EMS process improvement. Like what are you getting? What are you measuring? What are we looking at? And then sharing with each other about different types of metrics that you're capturing. Right? EMS data-related information needs to be utilized in strategic and operational excellence. I am absolutely amazed sometimes. When I go in, I used to do a lot of risk management audits, which is how I ended up getting started, you know, just in my working with EMS service providers. And I'd go in and start doing some audits, and I'd ask a very fundamental question. I just made it a habit of asking, hey, what's your strategic plan? You would sit there and say, well, I haven't had time to really write out or think about a strategic plan. And I would sit there and say, well, I think we need to start there, because everything that I'm looking at and trying to help you with from a risk management recommendation standpoint is really going to be dependent upon where you see yourself going. It's definitely a strategic issue. So without a strategic plan, you're kind of hurting yourself, and I'll actually dive into a bullet point there. Human capital risk management and safety is impacted. Now, my primary area is in that human capital space. I do a lot of risk management, a lot of safety. You know, I did the stretcher safety things, and the stair chairs, and working on lift programs, and all that fun stuff. But then I started to grow and get into pure risk management, also human capital related items, which is really focusing on the people and processes that we have. We have to hire people, we have to get them to do the things that we expect them to do in a very efficient way. The premise, positive impact can be patient care and experience, right? There's that word experience. It's the patient delivered, the patient care. How and what way did that go down? What's the family's perception of how things went? Positive impact on the community. If we're doing and adopting the Baldrige categories, we're putting things into place, we should start to see some positive outcomes as it relates to our community. Have we actually defined our community? You know, these are really interesting conversations and meetings that you can have initially, which is really, who is our community? Who are our stakeholders? Okay, we may think we know who they are, but do we really know who they are, and are we focusing on the right stakeholders? You can actually impact loyalty, and loyalty is twofold. Number one, within your community, and number two, an area that I'm actually in the here and now working with a couple of service providers on is this issue of employee engagement, because it's eroding. It's eroding in a very unhealthy way, and the loyalty factor is the people that we actually hire to work for us and with us. That loyalty factor and stability and turnover issues is something that really can bubble through and create risk management problems, safety issues, quality issues. So it's trying to get your hands around that and trying to stabilize that in some way. And then the impact on human capital. Human capital, broadly defined, is really the people and the processes, you know, the talent. You know, we have EMTs, great. Well, how skilled are they? How do they do things really well? Or are they just basically just barely making it? How about our medics? You know, what's their skill set? Are they sharp? Are they good? Are they clinically very proficient in what they do? Okay? Or are they just getting by? Right? Risk management and safety is also impacted. All right? So the fundamental idea here is that if you can think of an organization, think of your service as a circle, okay? And within that circle resides functional areas. You got HR, you might have information systems, dispatch, right? You clearly have your crews, your employee workforce, management, administration, billing, right? You also have risk management, safety. And within that context, all right, you get risk management effectiveness from organizational effectiveness. Okay, so a bunch of years ago, I used to laser in on safety issues and risk management problems. It's basically how I was trained. As I started to understand the way the operations function, I said, you know what, there's something a little goofy about this process, because I'm coming in and making recommendations on how to improve safety issues, and I'm trying to help EMS service providers improve on their HR systems. and risk management, OSHA compliance, you name it. So you can pick these little tiny bubbles within the organization, but I'm trying to do it in a system that's flawed. It does not have the appropriate structure to make this work, okay? There's like a very fundamental formula you normally write on the board, and it's WE times LE equal VR. So the work experience times the learning experience, work environment times the learning experience equal business result. And it's a basic way to get a service provider and their management team to think about something a little differently. If I go in there and do the best job I can possibly do for recommendations, OSHA compliance, safety, back injury prevention, all of that, but I have a work environment, the WE aspect of that formula, what's any number times zero? Zero. That's great. All right, fundamental mathematics. Right. Okay. So, well, hold on. Who's counting this toes? Good, we good? All right. So, you any number times zero, the business result is zero. So what I was finding is I was going in, I'm writing these lengthy reports and analysis based on injury trend data, insurance cost increases, blah, 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 and I'm writing these reports with all the fancy stuff in it, and I would issue it. But the thing is what? The work environment, the structure, the framework of the operation, its management, its leadership, it had issues. So this isn't going to go anywhere if you don't fix the system that's got to make it work. You follow? So that was a very frustrating process, and that was one of the aha moments I actually had when I was actually starting and working with a lot of EMS providers, and when I sat down to actually craft out a resource manual a bunch of years ago. So here's your challenge. I like quotes. I get a lot of inspiration from people who are very prominent historical figures. And one person that came to mind when I was sitting down trying to figure out who could I put up on the whiteboard to try to motivate you to think about something differently. And Sir Winston Churchill came to mind. I'm a little bit of a history buff. I missed the boat when I was in college. Somebody steered me away from being a history major. They said, well, you had to read history. Now I'm sitting back going, well, I could have gone to law school, I could have done this, I could have done that, right? The pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. So challenge number one to you when you leave today, when you go back home, you're kind of thinking through your operations, is am I looking at opportunities through a pessimistic lens? Is my initial gut reaction is the difficulty in what it is that you're suggesting I look at, or to sit back and say, you know what, I think there's an opportunity here, and I'm not going to let my mental model start to look at the barriers all the time. I want to actually get through that and focus on what good can come out of my looking at something a little differently. So that's the challenge, okay? I'm going to revisit that. So from what lens are you seeing things, and how will you lead, okay? The principles. So Baldrige categories. And I actually have the name of the document up there, and if you do, you just put it in your search engine and it will pop up. It's about a 105-page document. The Baldrige categories in and of themselves are based on 7 primary principles. Okay, first one is leadership. You have to have leadership. And folks, I'm telling you right now, there is a major distinction between leadership and management. Okay? It's funny how I end up getting called in on risk management problems and issues, only to get in there and actually be working with that organization for months on leadership development and management related issues. Because again, let's go back to what I just said earlier. If I'm trying to help them over here with risk management problems and issues, but I'm seeing an organizational breakdown, bad management, poor leadership, a misunderstanding between the two, accountability and performance measures, I can't help you there unless you have an infrastructure that's actually going to get that to actually work. So leadership is definitely number one, and we need to look at that. Are you leading? Do we have effective leaders? And by the way, leaders does not mean that you have a positional authority. A leader can be some way, it can be your EMT, it can be exercising leadership in and around what they do, the people they touch, and how they work with their crew members. Okay? It's not just positional authority, it can be, but we want to make sure that we break down that mental model thinking that, oh, you have to be a vice president, executive, a manager, a director in order to be a leader, and that's not true. So when I say number one is leadership, you want to look at the leadership qualities through and through. From top to bottom organization, all the way through and through, okay? Step one. Number two is, yes, strategic planning. If you don't have a strategic plan, that's a problem, okay? I'm telling you, in as loving kind of way as I possibly can, you need to have a strategic plan. It doesn't need to be the most eloquently written thing on the planet, you need to know where you're going. What is it that we want to do and how do we want to get there? So you need to anchor your Baldrige categories, your quality improvement, the way you want to do things in a quality strategic plan. Customer and market focus. Kind of strange saying that in the EMS industry, right? It's customer and market focus. Well, you do have customers and you do have a market, okay? What is that? How is it uniquely defined for me in the footprint in which I operate? Anybody who's growing and you're going into new counties or new areas of your state and you're growing, you're filling out your proposals to go into that area to service that territory, you need to go out and do a quality customer market focus. What is it that are you going to be providing for those people in that community who's your stakeholders? Measurement, analysis, and knowledge management. Going back to Dr. Deming, in God we trust, all others bring data. All right? You need to have some system of measurement. What are we looking at? What's the information that we're getting? How are we capturing it? Human resource focus. This is an area that I end up spending a lot of time on. It's not so much all these other elements. There's some very fundamental basic breakdowns in their HR processes, how they're hiring people. There's a distinction between orientation and onboarding. I've run across a number. You want to talk about just a low-hanging fruit issue for risk management and safety, is expecting that that medic who's got 20 years of experience is going to do the things that you want them to do at your operation. Right? Onboarding is something that you should make a part of your vocabulary. Process management and results. Okay? Now, how is this stuff applied to EMS? Well, in this book called The Leadership Guide to Quality Improvement for Emergency Medical Services, believe it or not, is dated 1997. Okay, so I've penned articles, I've penned chapters, I've been an editor in a book, and I actually put a manual together. When I was doing some research for this manual, I was focusing on the classic stuff: the HR, the safety, the risk management, the compliance, both state and federally driven. And all of a sudden, I tap in quality improvement, because at this point in my career, I'm starting to get A, a little ticked, and B, getting very passionate about process and human capital and quality. And I'm like, okay, we've got to focus on the organizational system, the EMS service provider structure, because I'm not winning the game on safety. And selfishly speaking, I was a little worried about the results I was helping my clients get. Because if I wasn't doing anything, my ability to impact EMS service providers is going to be quite short-lived. In other words, I'm putting a Band-Aid over the problem. I'm not actually helping fix or solve the issue. So I have this aha moment. I go out and this document pops up as a PDF when I'm doing the internet research. So I print this thing out, okay? This is before I was trying to kind of not print things out, save some trees. 105-page document, so I start flipping through it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here's the eureka moment, right? So I start going out and like no other EMS type of written materials I was coming across other than this stuff. And some of the work from the regional councils and some of the states and the Department of Public Health, I wasn't finding any of my clientele even adopting this, looking at it, never heard of it. I was running into that, so I've got to put this in my risk management and safety resource manual, because it makes a lot of sense. If I'm out there trying to be a spokesperson and get on a soapbox to say, we need to do EMS quality improvement and set up good infrastructure in order to drive risk management and safety, this is it. This is the document that's going to help me. So that was my huge aha moment back then, in pulling this information into risk management, safety, and actually driving that change. So that was the discovery, and believe it or not, this was actually developed under a grant of the Department of Transportation and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So if you're wondering where those tax dollars went, it went there. And that was actually a pretty effective report that actually came out of that grant. It was very, very good, okay? So, what's the idea here? It's designed to serve as a template for EMS managers. This resource document, and I don't even know half the people that even put the thing together. I went into it, I was trying to see if I recognized names, but I can tell you this, they did a fabulous job in putting this document together and tailoring it to your industry, okay? It is a very effective tool. So they designed it to be a template for EMS managers. You can take this information, go through it. Now here's the thing. Our society and the way we think now, you probably got 2 or 3 gizmos, right? I got 2 in my bag, right? Phasers on stun, yeah. Okay? So the thing is like what? We are constantly in the nut. We're a drive-through, we need it now. We're microwave magic, instant pudding, instant oatmeal, right? What are we going to want to do? Well, I need to have all these Baldrige categories put in place within the next 6 months. Guess what? It's not going to happen, folks, okay? You can think you're doing it, but this is not instant pudding. There's a little disclaimer there, okay? So the thing is it's to serve as a template. Can I go into this resource, this material, and the criteria I'll put up here shortly, and actually adopt 1 or 2 or 3 things to start the process, okay? Can I start the process and then allow it to be a living, breathing process and part of my culture, right? It's to establish and maintain quality improvement processes. So The document really sets it up. There's a criteria there called EMS process improvement. So what are the processes that we're setting up? And we're making it a part of our organizational DNA. All right, so we need to live it and carry it out. The biggest challenge you're going to find is if you leave here today and say, you know, I'm going to go ahead and take about 4 or 5 of these key things, and I'm going to put it in place. The biggest challenge you're going to run into is sustainability, sustaining the effort. Why? Because there are going to be parts of it that are difficult, okay? So I'll give you a case in point. This is an example of my wiring. So Saturday mornings, I wake up, get up early, cup of coffee, I sit on the little, I call it a Barca lounge, it's really nice, but I sit there. I get the remote, I get frustrated the batteries aren't working, okay? And on comes the P90X commercial, you ever see those commercials? And every Saturday morning, I swear, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that as I eat my donut and I drink my coffee. And I'm like, well, hey, this other commercial's promoting a vitamin to help me lose 10 pounds. Well, why would I want to do that if I can just swallow a pill, right? We're always looking for the easy, okay? You're going to run into parts of this that might be easy. There are little low-hanging pieces of fruit that we can actually implement. And we're going to go, wow, this is cool. This is actually working for now. The minute you start to get opposition, a little bit of resistance from people within, human behavior is what it is, you're going to have some tough love moments. And then you're also going to have those things where it is not a just add water and mix process, okay? So if you go out and you grab this resource tool, and you take some of these bullet items and throw them up, and you go put them in there, please understand, this is not instant pudding, and we like things to happen quick, very efficient, all right? So we need to make sure that we're committed to this process, all right? Mainly because there's a lot of damage that can occur if you go to put it into place. People get excited about it only to see it fall apart. It's what we call the banner program of the month, right? People used to call this total quality management, by the way. Actually, my boss at the university actually worked with Deming. It's not really something I say very often because sometimes it's about his age. But I say he worked with Deming, and Deming himself said he never called it total. He used to joke about it, saying total's a breakfast cereal. This is just quality improvement, right? It's not total quality improvement, all right? There's going to be tough parts, and the thing is when you put these little banner programs into place, and if it starts to fall apart, the workforce starts to question your commitment to actually making things happen. So what ends up happening, the next time you try to do it, they're going to say, okay, well, is this really going to happen this time? And then if that one falls apart, you go, okay, we're going to do it again, apply something else. And then if that falls apart, what happens now, they become so desensitized to what it is that you're trying to do when you do really want to change, that they will not even be energized around it. They'll just say, oh, it's just one of those things, okay? So be very careful there. All right, leadership. You need to have good, strong leadership and senior management behind this. Leadership management is managing tasks. It's about, task completion. It's about quotas. I often find it very interesting that there are people in a supervisory role who have this perception that supervision is about getting people to do the things that I feel like they should be doing that day. It's sort of like this servant type of master-servant type of role, when that's not it. That's, you just don't beat the daylights out of somebody and expect them to kind of follow, right? So there's a difference between leadership and management. But you need to have effective, you need to lead by example. So you need to role model the behavior. If you're going to go through with some form of Baldrige category quality initiatives within your operation, you need to be role modeling that. It could require you to change your terminology and the vocabulary that you use. You need to totally change the way you've been talking about something, the way you addressed it in the past. Sit down and say, look, we're going to do this differently. This is how we're going to do this. Have a strategic plan. All right, as an organization internally, we're now revamping and hitting the reset button on our own strategic plan because we need to do that. We need to sit down and actually figure out what it is that we want to do. We want to look at the whole organization and we want to promote quality and QI techniques in all work practices. And that's going to take some time. That's why I say this is not instant pudding. So in the area of HR, where I get called in a lot of times, we're sitting down, we're looking at performance measures, job descriptions, which really don't describe the job very well, and they're certainly by no means they're not competency models, which is an area that I would really challenge you to write that down and say, how can I build a competency model for my workforce, which is knowledge, skills, and abilities, and it goes way beyond job description, describing the job. This is competency. What do they do? How should they do that? It's both knowledge, skills, and abilities. Setting that up and measuring it. Now you're starting to embed these quality improvement items within the process. From a leadership, reaching out to anyone that you have in contact at the state, regional, or local level. Somebody needs to lead this effort, and this is what I call a process owner. So one of the key criteria you need to focus on and think about is who's going to be the process owner, who's going to take ownership for this. Now, it needs to be somebody who owns the show, runs the show, somebody within that level of the organization, because they need to be the person that the workforce is looking at saying, if they're doing this, this must be really important. So you don't want to delegate it to, like, Joe, who you just hired like 2 months ago, because he seems like a young and ambitious individual, so I'll just kick it to him. It's like, no. You need to be invested in this. If you're a part of that senior management realm, you've got to be visibly active in promoting and championing the effort, so you become the process owner. You can have delegation. It's just you need to be the glue to the process. Define the organization's mission, focus, its values, its long-term expectations. I do get some frustration out of the clients that I work with in that area. They think it's this exercise in warm and fuzzy, and I say, well, it's part of it. It's part of the warm and fuzzy. It's like we aspire to be, and there's like these lofty statements, but that means something. That when I get a group of leaders together and I'm forcing them, literally, some of them are willing, some of them are unwilling, to think through what it is that they do. What is it that you do? What do you provide? Because if you can't articulate it as an owner or a chief executive, that sort of thing, you don't have any connection to your own business. I mean, can you articulate, right? I'm constantly challenged, like, what's my elevator speech? If I'm going from ground floor to the 17th floor, and you're standing in the elevator, and I'm going to tell you what I do, bless you, what I do, how I do it, and my passion for it, I should be able to do it like that. So if I'm sitting in a room and I have like 2 hours to work with leadership, and I'm getting them to come up with a mission statement, and they're struggling, I think that's a problem. Right? So you want to start there. You want to sit back and say, hey, look, what's my mission? What's my vision? What am I actually doing? What are the values that I'm going to operate on? Why? Because this is an important message out to your community and your stakeholders. Think about it. This is what you're communicating to your stakeholders, your community, your potential patients, your recurring clientele, your transports, right? The nursing homes you might service, the hospitals. This is what you're portraying. A lot of clients I've come across in many years don't even give themselves credit for doing really, really good stuff, right? So why don't you start an organization's newsletter, electronic or written form, and send that out to your stakeholders. There's 2 ambulance service providers, and I'll give you a personal example. There's 2 ambulance service providers in my footprint where I live. So I'm the community, right? I'm the person who's interested in what they're doing. Do you know I give to one and I don't give to the other? I give to one and I don't give to the other. I give to the one that's furthest from my house. I have one that's literally up the street. Why do I give to one and not the other? Easy. My mother-in-law had a major medical problem. They were there. Not only did they show up in a very quick and efficient manner, they followed up with my father-in-law. Is everything okay? How's Mrs. Thomas doing? And then they sent out a card. Please tell us how we did. And they followed up with another card. We just wanted to check in to see how Mrs. Thomas is feeling. Is everything okay? By the way, was there anything that we didn't do that you felt we should have done? How did you think the overall experience was? Okay? Now I'll tell you what, my father-in-law, my wife, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, me, you're kind of like fuzzy, trying to figure out what just happened, right? I probably don't remember a whole lot, but I tell you what I value. I value the fact that somebody from that service provider picked the phone up, called us, right, and just inquired. I'm like, wow, that was different, right? Anybody familiar with Seth Godin's The Purple Cow? Where are we at? Purple Cow. So you're driving down a road, it's a farm, and you see a brown cow. And you're just going like, oh, okay, that's nice. And you keep on driving, right? You're driving down the same road, you look over, you see a purple cow. You're probably going to hit the brakes. You're going to pull over and go, holy smokes, that's a purple cow. Look at that, look how special that is, right? What did that service provider do that demonstrated that they were a purple cow? Purple cow is a metaphor for being different. You're stepping out, you're distinguishing what you do versus your competitor. They called, they inquired, they sent a card, they asked, right? I might not remember the details of that night on whether or not I thought the medic did a great job with the airway and stopped the bleeding, right? I'm like, I don't know, she got through it, right? But what I do remember is the fact that they bothered to call. They checked in. That stuck in my mind. Guess what? 2 months down the road, I get a solicitation in the mail from the service provider saying, would you please buy a membership or support her? I'm like, absolutely, right? I get another one of those in the mail from the one up the road. I'm like, nothing entirely unique there, right? I was passionate about supporting one. I didn't support the other. They reached out to me as a stakeholder, humbly in the community. They actually demonstrated to me their mission, their vision, their values, their focus. Okay, so that was something I thought, was a demonstrable commitment to me as a member of that community. And I will support them as long as I'm living in that community. Leadership, you want to designate a senior leader. So sit back and know who's going to champion this process. We need to have commitment there. By the way, if you can't get through that conversation, don't go past go, don't collect your $200, okay? Come out of that meeting with an agreement among senior leadership, who's going to drive what, who's going to champion what, who's going to be the process owner. Don't try to figure it out as you go, because that's a little wishy-washy and it lacks structure, it lacks the bonding agent that you're going to need, okay? You might want to meet with customers, share ideas, have focus groups, have a community town hall to the community that you serve and invite them in. You might find out some pretty interesting things like, oh, I didn't even know you guys were like just a quarter mile down the road. Oh, is that who you guys are? Right? Educate. I'll help them understand what it is that you do and what you're there for, okay? Information and analysis, another major component here. Managing and using data for quality improvement, management by fact and data. You need to find out what it is that we can get our hands on, what type of information we can get from databases, and then asking yourself the question like, well, what aren't we collecting? What aren't we measuring? Here's the other thing too, is I've been handed a lot of pie charts, spreadsheets, reports, and they look really cool. All these little fancy, I usually say, how did you do that? Because my tech only goes so far. How did you get that really cool three-dimensional pie chart thing? That's really nifty. That's great, but while you're helping me understand how you did this, what does this mean? So when this number goes like this, what does that mean to your business? What does that mean financial? What does that mean to you? And sometimes they have a very good answer on some of it, and other times they're like, you know, we really don't know. We really don't know what that does. When that number goes to here, we really don't have a direct connection to what it does for us as a service. We don't know if we spent too much money. We don't know if we didn't spend enough money. I have absolutely no idea what that number means. I'm like, great, why are we measuring it? Okay, well, it's a very good question. Great, let's save somebody the time and the energy and the headache of getting it and putting on a report where you frankly don't care. So if we're going to measure it, make sure it means something, right? We measure what we treasure. We measure what we treasure, both in employee performance and as an organization. Here's the other thing though. What am I not measuring that I should be treasuring? What am I not measuring that I should be treasuring? And that's something that I would really challenge you when you get to this information and analysis, these analytics, from HR systems to just a business overall. What am I not measuring that I should be treasuring right now? Okay. Our service, for an example, one of the things that the resource document is very good at doing for the EMS industry is it actually starts to give you some questions to ask. It starts to give you the recipe, the roadmap to follow, kind of like a checklist, if you will. Right? So, question: our service is timely? I got involved with a risk management claim one time where the family was suing the service provider for not being there on time, and that's why their family member died. Their family member was shot at point blank range with .357 Magnum right in the chest, right in the heart. And they were there within like 3 minutes and some odd seconds flat. I mean, they were there fast, right? We had to get an expert witness, one of those foremost cardiac surgeons in the area, to stand there and say, I could have been standing on the porch and watched this go down. There was no way I was saving that person's life, right? The thing is was it timely? Yeah, it was very timely. Was the outcome what we expected? No, but was it our fault? So some of the things that you can glean out of risk management processes and safety and just quality improvement is showing that we're doing the job we need to be doing, all right? Perfection's unattainable, but we can show that, boy, we've got some game here. It can help you from a risk management defensive posture standpoint. It can help you improve quality by looking at benchmarks and saying, you know what, we can do better, but man, we're doing a lot better than some of our competitors are doing. How can we do better, right? So measuring that, our service is timely. Do we subscribe to prescribed protocols? Are we following protocols? Patient and stakeholder satisfaction. Some of you might be thinking, well, how do I measure that? Well, that's it assumes that we have a mechanism in place to actually go out and get that information. So if we're curious about what our patient and stakeholder satisfaction levels are, we need to come up with a way to measure that. Putting a survey into play, figuring out how to go out in these little focus groups, figuring out how we can connect with the community. How do we do this? Now, response rates might be a little low at first. You're going to get so much information back, but can we get some information back? Can we get any information back? At least attempt to do the data capture and figure out how and in what way can we get an understanding of our patient and stakeholder satisfaction. Now, how do we compare to other systems? So this requires benchmarking, right? We have to go out and sort of look at the competition in the area. Who is it that we run up against all the time? You know, who's operating in our same footprint? what type of information is available that we can get our hands on? Can we go out into Google? It's a wonderful environment to go out and find certain things, right? We can crowdsource it, okay? Anybody familiar with crowdsourcing? So you might go on LinkedIn and join some sort of group, right? On LinkedIn. And then you would go into that group and you would pose a question, okay? And you would pose the question like, I'm trying to get an understanding of what the mean response time is for 911 calls in this particular geographical area, right? And then I'm telling you, within probably an hour, you'll probably have at least 10 or 12 responses. Oh, I found this, and I did this, and here's the link for that. A community of practice is willing to share that information, what we call a crowdsourcing mechanism, by throwing those questions out there and asking, right? You can even do it for the EMS and the Baldrige categories, by the way, right? I just did it this morning. I was kind of sitting there eating breakfast, and I threw it out there. It was like an Alameda Department of Public Health or something. It was like one of the, they had the Baldrige category very high level. So you just kind of reach out to somebody and you kind of troll and find out who's on the board, and you can reach out to, hey, can we have lunch one day, or can we, if I'm not in the area, can we get on a conference call and talk a little bit about how you did that, how did you get there, what were some of the barriers? You start to learn through this process. So you can go out and you can reach out to people that operate in your footprint, or you can crowdsource it. If they're unwilling to share it through that mechanism, you can share it to the environment, online environment, and share ideas of best practices. They're a community practice. And improving performance. Information and analytics, ambulance run form data, stakeholder data, insurance companies, employers, questionnaires, interviews, is equipment available? I remember one time, very inefficient, here's an example. One of my clients actually picked up a new transport in their footprint. Call comes in that they needed help getting to dialysis, so they scheduled the call. Dispatch sends the crew out. The crew gets there, the radio back on. Oh, we got a problem. What's that? This person is grossly obese. We had absolutely no idea. So they had to wait like another 15 to 20 minutes to get 2 other crews to come there, and then they had to call the fire department. I mean, they really were trying to figure out, hey, how did this person get into the place? We need to help them to get out of the place. And this is problematic, and it took a while. One crew went, and I sent another crew. All this time is being spent. Had we known this up front through asking the right questions and setting it up, so the idea was like, hey, what are we doing in terms of sending crews out, and do we know where we're sending them for the first time? After that, now we know, right? But the first time was a very, very, very labor-intensive process. It was inefficient when they looked at it. Comparative reporting and analysis, again, comparing against other folks that we operate with in that particular area. Strategic planning and quality. This is short-term and long-term objectives. So again, going back to strategic planning, do we know where we're going? Okay, do we know where we're going? What do we want to be? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to function and operate? You can put things in terms of qualitative as well as quantitative measures. Maybe you want to do some cost cutting. You want to look at some efficiencies. Maybe you want to add to the top line by expanding into other areas, right? We all know that everybody's getting squeezed in the industry, through the whole healthcare industry, right? Everybody's getting squeezed, so we need to look for efficiencies, cost reductions without compromising quality. I believe strongly that this framework, if adopted just even in part, can help in that process. How can we achieve these objectives? How do we measure effectiveness? Since I knew I was coming down to Orlando and I am a Disney junkie, actually Alice in Wonderland came out of a work by Lewis Carroll, if anybody's a Lewis Carroll fan. So there's this little quote, I wanted to pull an excerpt out of this to make a point. Alice walks up to the cat, if anybody's an Alice in Wonderland junkie, because I have a 13-year-old daughter, and there was a period of time in our lives where I think we were watching the same cartoons 5 times a week for years, okay? So anyway, Alice walks up to the cat, there's this scene, would you tell me which way I have to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to go, said the cat. Alice answers, well, I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you should go, said the cat. So this is why when I go into work with organizations, one of the first fundamental questions I ask them is, can I have a copy of your strategic plan? Do you have one? When was it last evaluated? And if they sit there and they say, well, I really don't have a strategic plan. So I'm like, well, how do you know which way you're going then? Everything that you do, from safety to risk management, to hiring decisions, to talent management, competency models, job descriptions, outcome data, OSHA compliance, whatever it is that you're doing, every road you go is the wrong way unless you know which way you're supposed to be going. Make sense? If I want to go here, and I want to be this, and I want to achieve this, everything that I do should be pointing me in that direction. In the absence of that, I just get up and shoot from the hip every single day. Well, I know I should be doing this, and it's the right thing to do, but I really don't know purely what the outcome is. So if you don't know where you're going, every road you take is the wrong way. So if I said in this room, hey, let's go to the Florida shore. I'll meet you at the beach. Great, we all stand up, we run out of here, we all hop on shuttles and buses and taxis and cars, and we start to head to the beach. What beach? What time? Daytona? East Coast, West Coast, right? We just sort of went somewhere. We absolutely know how I did to get there, but we're all right? Because I haven't defined where, how, what time. Your strategic plan is going to define all that. You need to start there. You got a leadership element, get commitment. Now we need to sit down and strategically plan this out. Measures, systems, processes. I want to define where it is that we're going. You may discover that you've got game. You may discover you've been doing a lot of really good stuff, and it's pointing you in the direction you always knew you wanted to go. This is a validation process then for yourselves. It could be a nice feel to say, hey, look, we may not have it perfect, but I tell you what, I think we've been doing a lot of good stuff. Now, how can we break it and make it better? I subscribe to what's called Break It Thinking. It's a really interesting book that you could possibly read. If it's not broke, break it and make it better. Okay? I challenge clients all the time. Look, you got these people who are strangleholding status quo. To me, that's a problem. Well, why do we need to do it differently? I'm uncomfortable. Well, I think you really need to be doing it differently. So let's break it and make it better. Okay? It's like driving the car by staring through the rearview mirror. You ever tried that? I would not recommend that, otherwise we might be calling you up for some help. But basically, think about it. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, why? Because it's been successful. Okay, great, I don't dispute that. Your information and your data tells me that. But if we don't have a really good crystal ball looking up ahead, the strategic plan, and focusing on quality measures, the stuff that's in here, and then these criteria, it's like driving your business by only looking through the rearview mirror. What's been successful in the past is no guarantee that it's going to be successful going forward. Why? The market is dynamic. The regulatory environment is challenging. Customers are challenging. Your stakeholders are challenging. Your communities in which you serve are challenging. Competition is challenging, right? Now we throw on what? Government regulation. Now it's really getting challenging, right? Not having some sort of career development process, education, training, right? Oh, that's great. You need to get that done, but now there's no way I'm paying for it. It's like, well, great, thanks for the message. You really care about my development and how I do it, but you're not going to help me kind of get through the training that I need without paying for it. So there's little tiny things that signal whether or not you're on board with somebody developing as a workforce. It's what we call a talent management framework, a talent management structure. What type of motivation do we have in play? There is a direct connection to risk management and safety, and this is one of the aha moments that I had many years ago in trying to make an effective outcome for safety issues, because I was directly tied in with a lot of the insurance entities out there for my clientele. I can't help you with rate containment on your insurances unless we have a good framework in place to help get some controls around things. And guess what? The safety, this compliance, this risk management stuff is really not going to have the impact that we desire unless the organization in which it needs to function in has got game. There's some structure there, and there's good leadership and good management. So this impacts service, patient, community, stakeholder value chain, what we call it. Okay? Design of jobs, just looking at, now the low-hanging fruit, I can tell you a lot of organizations will go out and they'll start with some low-hanging fruit areas. Where do they go? They do go to the HR space. And they'll sit there and say, okay, employee handbook, the design of the jobs, the job descriptions, do we have role clarity? Okay, how does a person graduate from this one to this one to this one? Do I have some good progression? Because they're what we call a super keeper, a high potential. I would identify those people, folks. Who within your ranks really gives you a good impression that they might be your next regional manager? Or they might be in charge of this or in charge of that, and they're really showing you that they've got the skills that I like. A, have you identified those people? Number two, or B, to be consistent here, is have you gone to them and actually sat down and say, what is your career objectives? What gets you excited about doing what you do, and what do you think you might want to do in the next couple of years? Because first of all, that can be a very expensive loss, what we call it regrettable. We always track turnover data, the turnover, what's our churn? Start measuring something called regrettables. Who are the people that left that we absolutely regretted the fact that they left? And I have no idea that they're ready to go. That's what we call a regrettable. Stop doing stuff on exit interviews and start doing what's called stay interviews. You go and you talk to these people over lunch or coffee, and you want to take the pulse of what's inside their heads. How do you like it around here? Please be frank and candidly. Be professional. Don't rip me from here to tomorrow, but tell me quite frankly, my meeting your needs. How do you think about the organization? I just commissioned a study with a service provider, and I got the data in my hands, and I got a meeting coming up. It was painful to read through the report. It was downright painful. because there's a lot of stuff going on there that can be addressed through those types of interactions. So that's one of those low-hanging fruit areas from an HR perspective. Creating opportunities, effective competency models. Competency models is really defining the behaviors, the skill sets, the education, the outcome. You know, what is it that these folks need to do and do well to be competent? It's not to infer that people are incompetent about this in a negative sense, but it's basically going beyond the job description to define this is what we need you to do and how we need you to do it. And then putting into play what's called an engagement survey. People can be satisfied with their jobs and they can be disengaged. You cannot be engaged and not satisfied though, okay? Let me explain. An engagement ratio is the percentage of people based on survey criteria. So we set up a survey, we get the data, and we can determine what an engagement ratio is. So you look at based on the feedback and the criteria and how we set the actual survey instrument out, will tell us how many folks are actually engaged. And then we can determine who is not engaged, and on the other side of that spectrum is what we call actively disengaged. And your engagement ratio is taking the active disengaged and subtracting it from engaged. That gives us the actual engagement ratio. Why? Engagement is people who are emotionally and committed to achieving your organization's objectives. Actively disengaged are the people that swim around your office sowing the seeds of dissent. Like, can you believe he did that? I can't believe that. You're on board with me, right? This sucks, right? I mean, yeah, you're with me, right? We need to object to this, right? You're with me, right? They're going around literally lobbying for effort. These are like the Debbie Downers of the office that just walk around and just sort of, you know, you feel great, you walk in, you go home going, oh my gosh, I got hit by a truck and her name was Debbie, right? It's like, man, it's like, and then you start going, wow, am I really at the right place? Maybe they're right. That's active disengagement. And then you have the people in the middle who are just, you're not engaged, you're not actively disengaged, you're just sort of there. And that gets into what's called presenteeism. We don't really know what they're doing. They're kind of there. We think they're working. They might be on Monster.com looking for a job, but they're working at their computer. So champion an engagement survey to figure out, are they engaged? Because, you know, they might be satisfied with their job. They like their uniform, they love the vehicle they drive, you got all the tools are there. The computers look really cool, but they're tuned out. They just like what they're working with, but they're not committed to the organization, okay? Top 10. By the way, you guys can make available the PowerPoint if they want. Okay, so, okay. Gallup did a top 10, and he wanted to figure out what actually drives engagement, your workforce. These are the people that you hire, these are the people you spend a lot of money on to do stuff that you're hiring to do, right? Within the top 5, typically compensation will come up, but it's never within the top 3. There's this flawed perception by everybody. Oh, it's always about pay, always about pay. You know what? Pay pays, pays, pay. I understand the pay issue. In fact, I work with clients who have to compete against the municipality-run systems where benefits alone become a major challenge, right? Being able to provide those level of benefits. But you actually look at the top 10, it's respect. It's, you know, bright, comfortable surroundings, having respect from the leadership element of the organization, being able to get these other, you know, things that are beyond compensation. So it was a really fascinating study, and Gallup actually went out and looked at a lot of information. In other words, N does not equal 2. N equals like 50,000. I mean, they really went out and statistically drove this information to figure out, is what we're seeing real? And this is the stuff that kind of bubbled out. So influences within EMS, what I've seen in my travels, what comes out of literature, what comes out of real world examples. I looked at 3 buckets, and one's organizational, the other's management, the other's human resources, which is an area that a lot of people will go to because, you know, rightfully so, there's a lot of people-related issues. So organizationally, looking at culture, the quality of leadership, do you have people in leadership positions that got there by virtue of tenure, or did they actually earn it through leadership capability? And it's very damaging if people get it by virtue of tenure, because now it becomes entitlement, not actually competency-based leadership. So if you got somebody with 5 years of experience who can execute on great leadership capabilities, or somebody who's got 25 years, I put the person in 5 years to actually drive the leadership, and if they don't like it, deal with it. The person with 20 years who's not getting promoted needs to look themselves in the mirror and say, what do I need to do differently to be a better leader? Okay. Management, style, respect, all those sort of criteria. From an HR standpoint, HR, fostering positive culture, attract, retain talent, metrics, sustainability. A lot of the standard criteria that you see coming out of the Baldrige category. Process management is another area that the information focuses on from the Baldrige category, is looking at how we actually do things, workflows. So this is about how something gets from point A to point B to point C. How structured is it? How are decisions made? Future trends? Who's actually sitting back and saying, hey, I got an idea, and how do we make that idea go? Okay, an idea is just an idea. A lot of people misuse the word innovation, by the way. Innovation is not innovative unless it's actually put into place and actually results in a tangible difference. Other than that, it's only an idea. So you got to put an idea in place. System results, quality achieved, define it in a strategic plan. So what does success look like? Defining what the end looks like, knowing that we'll never get there, but we want to strive to get there, right? Continuous. And then back up from that and say, what do we need to be doing to actually achieve what we're envisioning here for this organization? Right? Inputs usually are leadership, EMS workforce, suppliers, and equipment. If you look at process, examples that come out of Baldrige categories, time of call, dispatch, vehicle response, service response time, arrival of the patient, the airway management, different types of criteria that we know we can manage and collect that information. The outcome could be death, disability, discomfort, destitution, a perception that you did a great job, right? Patient satisfaction, stakeholders, ensuring ongoing satisfaction, which is those phone calls that my family gets, like after something like that happens, saying, hey, we're concerned, how are things? Or thank you for allowing us to be of service to you and your family, we hope everything's working out, and that card shows up in the mail going, oh my gosh, look at that. Okay, we did something like that with some nursing home clients about sending, a lot of folks call up, phone call comes to the administrator, and somebody in the nursing home calls the family, what's the first reaction? Oh, great, what happened now, right? We actually got the administrators to start calling and saying, hey, I just wanted you to know that Dad ambulated 50 feet on his own. Boy, are we excited. We just wanted you to know about that. Why? Because every time they get the call from the nursing home, it's negative. It's like, let's switch the mindset here and reach out to the family and say, hey, I just want to call you and let me know that Mom did a great job. We actually have her off the walker and she's doing great. And we just wanted you to know that. And we'd really like you to come in and actually sit down next time you come in so we can talk to you about how we did that. And it's like, wow, you just changed the whole perception of that. So you want to look at the patient, the family, the community, governments, third parties, which are your stakeholders. And the challenge revisited. So the pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty, right? So through what lens are you looking at things today? How and what way can you change the way you think about things, whether simple or large, micro or macro, to do that one different thing differently? Something that just came into my head, there's something called the 212-degree project. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that. Anybody familiar with that, 212? YouTube 212. It's fascinating. At 1 degree of difference means the water will boil and the water will not boil. If I can get my workforce, including myself, to do that one extra thing, that 1 degree of change, that 1 degree of difference, means I'm hot, I'm boiling, I'm making a difference, versus I'm sitting there on the stove and I'm simmering. You get the picture? What's that one thing I can do differently? So from what lens are you looking at things? How will you lead? Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. You don't leave here and just do this and say, boop, box is checked. I need to make this a habit of not only myself, but my workforce. What happens? Don't go and get into that instant pudding mentality, right? Okay? Keep shooting for the moon. Try to do all of it. Work toward it. Why? Because when you look backward to assess and smell the roses after a period of time, you're going to realize we've made some significant progress here. Okay? And the old adage I like to kind of throw out there is you shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you'll be among the stars. You're actually going to be doing something really good. Don't get so hung up on whether or not you've arrived. Keep the journey going. Einstein, one of my favorite characters, right? By the way, his brain, they actually did, it really is, if you want to have a sidebar on this, I get fascinated by these learning channel things. I can stay up all night watching this stuff. He made a quote one time, the significant problems we face will not be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. What does that mean? If we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So he says, hey, why do we want to keep doing that? We created the problem. Why do we keep throwing the same solution at the problem we're creating? That's insanity. It's nuts. You're wasting your time, your effort, and you're driving people crazy, right? It's not broke, break it, make it better. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you to keep making a difference. I appreciate the service you provide. My family has benefited from quality service providers such as you. And I thank you for everything you do for our communities and our families. Here's my contact information. I got cards if you want them. I appreciate it. Hopefully I got you to think a little differently about what you do and how you do it. Maybe you can leave here and do that one extra thing different. All right? Thank you very much.